There is a specific kind of silence that exists deep within the American wilderness. It's not peaceful. It's a heavy, suffocating quiet that happens when nature itself holds its breath. When the birds stop chirping, the insects go dead silent, and you realize that whatever is hiding in the shadows has just noticed you. My name is Marcus. For over 12 years, I worked as a backcountry search and rescue ranger in one of the most rugged national parks in the Pacific Northwest. In these dense, old-growth forests, it is terrifyingly easy to vanish. We call them the missing 411 files, cases where people disappear without leaving a single trace. No footprints, no dropped gear, no scent for the tracking dogs, just gone. For a long time, I forced myself to believe there was a logical explanation for every single one of them. But exactly 3 years ago, on a cold, misty Tuesday in late October, I saw something that shattered my reality forever. It started at 4:45 p.m. A call crackled through my radio. A 24-year-old experienced backpacker named David Miller had been reported missing by his fiancée. He was on a solo 3-day hike along a remote, glacier-carved valley known as Blackwood Ravine. The trees there are so thick that even at noon, the forest floor remains shrouded in a dim twilight gloom. Because a severe storm was predicted by midnight, dispatch ordered a quick 2-man sweep. Joining me was Ethan, a 25-year-old rookie fresh out of the academy, full of naive confidence. By the time we reached the trailhead, the last remnants of daylight were fading into a thick, bluish-gray fog. I warned Ethan, keep your eyes open. The fog rolls in fast. If you lose sight of the trail, stop exactly where you are. We hiked in silence for about 2 hours, the only sound being the crunch of wet pine needles beneath our boots. The deeper we went, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. The twisted branches interlaced above us like a cage. At around 7:15 p.m., we found the first sign of David Miller. The beam of my flashlight caught a bright green, 4-season camping tent nestled between 2 massive cedars. As we approached, a cold knot formed in my stomach. The tent was completely unzipped, its rain fly flapping weakly in the freezing wind. Inside, everything was a chaotic mess. David's expensive sleeping bag was half torn and thrown into a corner. A pot of food had been knocked over, spilling across the floor. Most disturbing of all, his phone, his wallet, and his heavy hiking boots were still inside. No experienced backpacker walks away from their shelter into freezing, predator-filled woods at night, barefoot. Marcus, look at this, Ethan said, his voice losing its confident edge. He was kneeling at the edge of the clearing, shining his light onto the muddy ground. I walked over and looked down. There were bare human footprints deeply pressed into the soft mud, leading directly into the thick, dark brush. The wide distance between the steps proved he had been sprinting for his life. But what made my blood run cold was what lay right beside his tracks. Every few feet, there were deep, heavy indentations in the mud. They weren't animal paws, and they certainly weren't human boots. They looked like massive, elongated, hand-like prints with long, blunt fingers pressed incredibly deep into the soil. Whatever made them was moving on all fours, dragging immense weight with terrifying power.
Is that a bear? Ethan whispered, his chest heaving.
No, I said, drawing my service weapon. Bears don't leave finger marks like that, and they don't hunt like this. We need to call for full backup right now. I pressed the button on my radio. Nothing but loud, harsh static filled the airwaves. My satellite communicator flashed. No signal.
The massive valley walls were blocking everything. We were entirely on our own. We had a choice: turn back and let the storm wash away the clues, or follow the tracks a bit further. Duty took over. We couldn't leave a kid to die out there in the dark. We followed the tracks for exactly 10 more minutes, I told Ethan. If we don't find him, we head straight back. We pushed through the dense, thorny brush, following that ungodly trail. The rain began to fall in earnest, hard, icy needles that stung our skin and blurred our vision. The wind howled through the high canopy, making the trees groan like dying beasts. And then, suddenly, the wind stopped. The rain was still falling, but the wind completely died down to an eerie, unnatural stillness. The rustling leaves, the creaking wood, the distant wildlife noises, everything vanished instantly. The only thing left was the sound of our own heavy breathing. It was total sensory deprivation. My ears literally started ringing from how quiet it was. "Marcus," Ethan whispered, his voice trembling so hard I could barely hear him. "Do you feel that?" I did. It was a massive drop in barometric pressure, accompanied by a sickening, metallic smell in the air, like copper or old blood. Every primitive evolutionary instinct inside my brain was screaming at me to run. We were no longer the hunters. We were being watched. I raised my flashlight, slowly sweeping the beam across the dense tree line. Then, about 50 yards away, behind a massive, rotting Douglas fir tree, the light caught something. Two faint, pale yellow reflections. Eyes. But they weren't low to the ground like a wolf or a cougar. They were positioned nearly 9 feet up in the air, staring directly at us from the absolute darkness. I froze. My hand holding the flashlight began to shake uncontrollably. "Ethan," I whispered out of the side of my mouth, never taking my eyes off those pale yellow spheres. "Step back. Slowly." Instead of stepping back, Ethan did the worst thing possible. Out of sheer panic, he jerked his flashlight upward, shining the full bright beam directly onto the creature. I will never forget what that light revealed. Standing behind that tree was a creature that defied every law of nature. It was easily 9, maybe 10 feet tall, but its body was sickeningly thin and emaciated, like a corpse that had been stretched out. Its skin was a pale, chalky gray, stretched so tightly over its rib cage and long limbs that you could see every single bone shifting beneath the surface. Its arms were unnaturally long, hanging down past its knees, ending in those same massive, elongated hands with blunt, powerful fingers we had seen in the mud. Its face was a living nightmare. No hair, no visible nose, just 2 sunken, hollow eye sockets glowing with that faint, predatory yellow light. And its mouth was a wide, lipless, horizontal slit that stretched almost from ear to ear. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. The creature just stood there, its head tilted at an unnatural 90-degree angle, analyzing us. The sheer malice radiating from its hollow eyes felt like a heavy weight pressing down on my chest. Then it let out a sound. It didn't roar. It didn't growl. Instead, a voice came out of that wide, lipless mouth. A voice that sounded incredibly strained, distorted, and broken, like a tape recorder playing at the wrong speed. "Help. Please. It's cold." My jaw dropped. It was a human voice. It was the voice of a young man. "Oh my God," Ethan gasped, his flashlight dropping a few inches. That's David." "No, Ethan, it's not him," I screamed, pulling him back by his jacket. "Look at it." The moment I shouted, the creature's mouth opened incredibly wide, dropping all the way down to its chest, revealing rows of black, needle-like teeth. It dropped onto all fours with a sickening crunch of its joints, its long limbs bending backward like a spider, and it launched itself toward us with terrifying speed. It was just a blur of pale gray skin and scrambling limbs cutting through the fog. I didn't think. I raised my service pistol and fired 3 shots into the darkness. The loud bangs shattered the silence of the valley, the muzzle flashes briefly illuminating the creature's horrifying, oncoming face. The sudden noise made it hesitate for a split second, letting out a high-pitched, metallic screech that rattled my teeth. "Run!" I roared. We turned and sprinted back down the trail. I have never run faster in my entire life. We threw away our heavy packs, keeping only our flashlights and my gun. Behind us, we could hear the terrifying sound of snapping branches and heavy, thudding impacts as that thing pursued us on all fours, tearing through the forest like a freight train. Every few seconds, that awful, distorted voice would echo through the trees behind us, mimicking Ethan's own voice. "Marcus, wait, stop, please." It was mocking us. It was hunting us for sport. We didn't stop until we finally broke through the tree line and collapsed into our parked Ranger vehicle at the trailhead. I slammed the locks down, started the engine, and tore out of that parking lot, spraying gravel into the night. We didn't look back once. The next morning, a major regional supervisor arrived at our station. Before Ethan or I could even submit our official incident reports, we were pulled into a private windowless office. 2 men in dark, unmarked tactical gear were standing by the door. Our supervisor looked at us with a cold, dead expression. He told us that David Miller's case was being officially classified as an accidental fall into a glacier crevasse due to the storm. He then pushed a stack of non-disclosure agreements across the table. "You two encountered a rogue, highly aggressive alpha grizzly bear last night," the supervisor said, his voice entirely flat, staring directly into my eyes. "You panicked, fired your weapons, and retreated. That is the only story that leaves this room. If any other details, any descriptions of what you think you saw are leaked to the public or the media, your pensions will be revoked and you will face immediate federal charges." I looked at the men in the tactical gear, then at the paperwork. I realized then that they already knew. They knew exactly what was living in Blackwood Ravine. The national parks weren't just created to protect nature, they were boundaries. Lines drawn on a map to keep the public away from things that belonged to the dark. Ethan and I signed the papers. I resigned from the National Park Service the very next week. I moved thousands of miles away to a flat desert city where there isn't a single pine tree for miles. David Miller was never found. Every year, millions of families visit these beautiful national parks, pitching their tents and hiking the trails, completely unaware of the ancient hunger waiting just beyond the tree line. If you ever find yourself hiking in the deep woods and the wind suddenly dies down, if the birds go completely quiet and the air smells like copper, don't look for the trail. Don't check your phone. Just run. If you enjoyed this true creepy story from the deep woods, make sure to subscribe to Centuries of Silence, leave a like, and turn on notifications. Share your own terrifying encounters in the comments below. Stay safe out there, and don't look behind you.